Hello there and welcome to MarketSquare. My name is Oluwapelumi Awe and I'm happy you joined in today on this episode titled The Scorecard. The Scorecard. Now, for starters, I love football. I love football a lot. And to be very exact, I'm a Man U fan. And just so that you don't confuse Man U for Arsenal and Chelsea that didn't win anything last season, we defeated Man City in the FA Cup final to win that particular trophy there. And a big shout out to every Man U fan watching this at the moment. In football, when a striker is about to be signed by a club after being scouted by the club scout, what determines how many years the player will get signed for will be dependent on how old the player is and how good the player is. Usually after the signing, his performance is being monitored yearly. His performance is being monitored yearly, and that would define if his contract will get terminated, if he will get sold, or even if his contract will get extended. A little over a year ago, President Bola Tinubu assumed the first-class duty as the 16th president of Nigeria, succeeding former President Muhammadu Buhari, and made a promise of a renewed hope. If you were to score him, given the many happenings in the last 12 months so far, what grade would you give him? Would you give him an A, B, a C, D, E, or F? I don't know. It's over to you now. With my guest today on the show, we'll look at what is working, what is not working, what work that should be revisited, and what we should consider doing going forward. Before I introduce my guest and dive in deeply into the matters on the show today, let's do the numbers. Yesterday, the value of Naira depreciated at the NatFest rate by 3.78% from 1,439.48 Naira per dollar to 1,495.98 Naira per dollar, while the Bureau de change rate depreciated by 1.35% from 1,460 Naira per dollar to 1,480 Naira per dollar. Now, on both sides, you could observe decrease on both sides, and it's only expected that in the coming days we should expect to see some appreciation. And some strong words from the CBN yesterday has it that they revoked the license of Heritage Bank, and that's like to send a signal to the financial institutions in Nigeria saying that they are not just going to close their eyes to see things collapse, right? Even the NDIC has been asked to liquidate the asset and liabilities of the bank. But we'll get to that maybe most likely next Tuesday on the show. I promise we're going to look into that even more next Tuesday on the show. But for now, my guest today is a consultant and the lead at Sporos Consult. He has been on my show at some point to speak about the news and stocks, and he's on the show today to also have his voice. And we look at this together as to how well President Bola Tinubu has done in the last 1 year and see what can be done going forward. Mr. Olasoji Odunayo, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Pelumi. It's great to be on the show again. And it's also great to find out that you're a Manchester United fan.
I saw now on your profile that you're also a Man U fan. I saw that too.
Definitely. Always. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Now, some have said that President Bola Tinubu inherited a fragile economy, that it did not matter who became the president, we will still be what we had today. And some have even said that as of June 2023, our debt profile was at 77 trillion naira. Do you think that's just an excuse? Or if, for instance, Peter Obi had become the president, things would be better at this time?
All right, thank you so much for having me. And it's good we are starting this way because we first of all have to admit the fact that truly this administration inherited a very battered economy. All right, and this is not trying to make an excuse for them, for the areas that they have not done very well. But first of all, I believe that in addressing the problem, the first thing is to first of all identify the problem and come to terms with it. Because one of the most difficult thing one might encounter in solving a problem is to continually live in denial. So, and even our president admitted when he was taking up the office, at the point when he was at the beginning of this administration, that he knew very well what he was getting into, and he said it clearly that nobody should pity him, all right, because he knew exactly what he was getting into, and he was ready to take up the challenge to fix whatever it is that was wrong with the economy. So, truly, yes, the administration inherited a battered economy. Debt profile was very high, inflation was on the rise, and there were problems that were clearly needed to be fixed. But the past administration, either for political reasons or whatever reason, decided to shift it. For instance, and we were going to come to that, the removal of subsidy on PMS and other things that obviously had to be done, but the administration chose not to address them before leaving. So it was clear that we were coming into a season, a tough season. And so, but like I said, it's not an excuse. A lot of things could have been done better. And as we go on, we're probably going to come to that.
Sure.
But I feel so far it's been a mixture of the good, the bad, the ugly. And I hope that in the next few months to years we'll get to fix them as this administration tries to fix things up.
Like you rightly said, it's been an administration of the good, bad, and ugly. But let's start with the good there. So some have said that it's done some very good moves, starting with the clearing of our FX backlogs, and that's a lot. And that was something that our Naira from appreciating in the last 2 years. So what are the goods you think he has achieved so far in the last 12 months?
All right, thank you so much. So like you said, a very major move, and when the current CBN, Mr. Yemi Cardozo, when he was brought into office, I believe that one of the things that he said was that he was going to prioritize, the CBN was going to prioritize clearing of the current FX backlog, and that was one of the things that they immediately set out to do. Immediately they started this administration. And so we had a situation where there was a lot of efforts towards ensuring, and it was a gradual thing, but by March this year, they eventually achieved, I think they cleared the last tranche of about $1.4 billion to different customers that the CBN had FX obligations to. And one of the things that did was to, first of all, of course, increase the flow of dollars in the economy, all right, the supply of dollars, which, because a major problem our FX environment has had is, the problem with the differential between demand and supply for dollars. So in doing that, they were able to increase the flow of dollars, all right, and then help to have a system where the FX environment is well ventilated. Another thing that the government did that I believe was a great move and a beautiful move was, the fact that they registered, some more international money transfer operators. We call them IMTOs. And one of the things that did, because I know that one of the restrictions that we had in the last administration was the fact that we had a lot of the bureau de change operators they had a field day, and no economy is run on the black market or on the alternative market. So a lot of activity was going on in that place, and it was affecting, because the black market is not regulated. So that means that there was a lot of underhand deals affecting, and it kept making our efforts, value to go up. So one of the things that the government had to do was to liberalize that FX environment, and make provision for us to have, more IMTOs. And once we had more IMTOs, it helped us to be able to liberalize the FX environment. So you had officially more people operating within the space, and that means there was more supply. The customer had,
more choices, more alternatives, of course. And then the last thing I think that the CBN has done that has helped to at least stabilize things a little bit was to cut down on the information asymmetry in the markets. All right. So we have a situation where, for instance, you have so much lack of information within the market. And what happens when there's information asymmetry in the market is that because information is not available, the buyer is left at the mercy of the seller. So you had a situation where most of the time sellers within the black market FX space just wake up one morning and say, this is the price we are selling dollars today. And then it goes, of course, that was one of the reasons that the former CBN governor had to, go after Aboki FX and some other organizations that seemed or they appeared to be the ones fixing the FX rates. Even though yes, it was a market thing, but we also know that the fact that this the information that was available to the buyer was largely restricted. It made it like a black market where the buyer was left at the mercy of the sellers. But one of the things that the CBN has done is to continually engage the market. You see, the CBN governor continually coming out, giving updates. We've seen our MPC meetings have become more regular, and because of that, you find that continual adjustments are being made to what is happening within the FX market. So all in all, it's not all bad. Of course, a lot of things could improve, but it's not all bad because we see genuine efforts, particularly from the government, especially on the monetary policy aspect, even though there's still a lot to be done in the area of the fiscal policy, But on the Lord, I think that we have some goods that we can build on if the government is sincere and if everyone comes on board with the efforts of the government.
Okay, now let's speak about policies. And I think the first thing that happened on the day that President Bola Tinubu was inaugurated was the announcement of the removal of fuel subsidy. The impact that statement had, just by pronouncing it, and I'll tell you how much influence he has, just by pronouncing the removal of fuel subsidy, everything skyrocketed from the next day. So I want to ask you, do you think he got that right? Now, we can say about the policy and also talk about the timing. Do you think he got the policy right, and was that the right time to make the call?
Okay, so I remember I was seated in my sitting room watching, the inauguration, and as the president spoke, and he said subsidy is gone. I told everyone around me, I said, hey, we are in for a rough ride. I knew that, of course, apart from the fact that, you see, subsidy has always been the elephant in the room. All right, everybody knew it had to go, but nobody knew how to get it out of the room. All right, and everybody was trying to avoid getting it out of the room. So we all knew it was there. All right, but everyone just found ways around it. And I must say it was a bold move by the president to make that statement right there and right there. Now I believe so strongly that the truth is, whoever become president, and if you check the campaign of all the major presidential hopefuls, then all of them said they were going to remove subsidy. So it was clear that subsidy had to go anyhow. It had to go. So I believe that the question, it is not a question if subsidy had to go. All right. So now the timing also for me was not a problem. And why do I say the timing was not a problem? The truth is this, that one of the reasons why most of the other administrations had found it difficult to remove it also was the fact that in the process of trying to buy time and set up committees and do all kinds of things to say, how do we do this? Now, as all that is going on, most of the time, we slow down the process and we know that our economy is largely built on our political cycle. So that means that once it's getting to the fourth year of every administration, they are careful not to institute or announce any policy that's going to affect or significantly affect their chances of election. So most of the time, by the time we start setting up committees, this one is meeting, that one is happening, before you know it, it's almost time for another election. And then the president says, hey, we can't do it now. Let's move it to the next. So, and that has been the case for subsidy. Remember when President Goodluck Jonathan even made an attempt to cut down on the subsidy at some point. I mean, we saw the effects. It had, protests everywhere and all of that. So everyone knew that this thing had to go, but it was a difficult thing to do. So the timing for me was not a problem. I think the only issue probably was the fact that I believe that the government and the economy was not prepared for that announcement. All right. And we're going to come to that, when there are already underlying, problems within the economy, or what the removal of subsidies did was to aggravate them. So the point was not the removal of subsidy itself. It was the fact that a lot of underlying issues were there that, subsidy that was on PMS was basically covering it up. But immediately that happened, he opened up the space, and then everything began to go haywire. So I think that it was our preparedness. I don't think it was the policy. I don't think it was the timing. I think it was our preparedness. And the truth is this: really, really, the question would be: are we ever going to be prepared? I don't think so. So we've got to find a fine balance between getting, doing what we have to do, and waiting for the right time, because the right time might never ever come. So I believe that we'll find the balance. Sometime, I do not know how soon that is going to happen, but I believe that we are going to find the balance. I'm hopeful towards that.
Okay, that's the one of fuel subsidy is on the fiscal side. Now, talking about the monetary side, we have it that the foreign exchange market at some point people started crying in the mean to exchange dollar for naira. The CBN reverted to a willing buyer, willing seller basis, and that almost immediately affected the value of our naira. In fact, at some point, to get a dollar to exchange a dollar, you will get 1,900 naira, and that was quite a lot of money for people to pay, especially those who school abroad, who want to go for medical checkup outside the country, who want to go do stuff outside the country. It was quite a lot, and the international market just kept watching and looking at us as we struggle to revive the strength and the life of our naira. So the question now will be, and in a bid to solve the issue, the CBN even had to clamp down on Binance, and just to put things in perspective, do you think that move was the right move? So I'll be asking you about the policy and also the timing, because you cannot initiate two powerful policies at the same time from the fiscal and monetary side and expect the people not to feel it. So I want to ask you now, do you think the move to revert to a willing buyer, willing seller basis was the right call to make at the time it was made? And do you still think it's the right move to make at this time?
All right, thank you so much. So, like you said, on the fiscal side, the subsidy had to be removed and all that. But like you said, I personally also think that it wasn't a very good move that these two major policies had to be done at the same time. All right, these two major policies have to be done at the same time, because I believe that these two are like the most critical issues that our economy had. And because we still had, because Nigeria is still a largely import dependent economy. All right, and that meant that whatever it is that we're doing, that would affect imports, and then also affect the petroleum industry. All right, which is currently and is still our highest earning FX, highest FX earner, meant that it was going to cut across practically the whole of the economy. So I also think that it wasn't a very great idea that both policies had to be implemented at the same time. I believe that it could have been implemented either that you took them one after the other and measure the impact, trying to douse the tension, and then bring the second one. Or even if you had to implement both at the same time, you probably had to implement them in a measured way, in a gradual way. All right, over time. For instance, the subsidy was probably implemented, in a gradual way, where gradually was removed, and then the same thing for the FX. But like I said, it happened, and then it practically boomeranged on the economy, and because of that, I believe that what happened was the fact that there were underlying problems. Like I said, for me, I believe that I mean, if you remember, and I'll probably just draw this parallel. If you remember what happened during COVID-19, all right. Now, most of the people that died due to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, was not necessarily about the virus itself. It was majorly about the fact that they had underlying health issues, that they were probably treating. Some were not even treating them, but they did because they didn't know. But immediately they got hit by COVID-19, it aggravated all those issues, and then it led to a lot of deaths. And that is what is also happening with the economy. We have a lot of underlying issues that were there but were being covered up. You have high exchange rate, you have our high energy cost, you have the cost of production, our production inputs, transportation, and all of that. You have insecurity, in majorly in our food producing areas. We have the very high infrastructural deficits that we're still trying to make up. And then all of those things were there, and then these two policies came and aggravated them. All right. So for me, were they good policies? Yes. All right. But like I said, we were not prepared for them. So the thing would have been maybe a gradual implementation of them. But as it is, we are where we are. And I think that, the next thing is, how do we come out of these doldrums? Because whatever it is, the policies have been implemented,
Definitely.
and I believe so strongly that the solutions and how we can, get out of them is what everyone, should be thinking about and hoping that we can get it right this time around.
Well, okay, thank you very much. Now, speaking about policies, again, I think in asking the other question, I mentioned that the CBN had to clamp down on BNAS at some point because there was speculation that the platform afforded for manipulation of the value of Naira, meant that it was affecting the value of our Naira. And we've also seen policies like cybersecurity levy, and you mentioned it already, that you can't just keep putting out policies and policies and policies, bringing out ideas when the people have not even taken a breather from the one you initiated before.
Exactly.
Picking up cybersecurity levy, that one people said no way, and they had to just pull that back to say, see, we don't want issues here. But that we have some issues on ground, and one of such is the one that is ongoing, the electricity subsidy removal, which is supposed to be something to serve as relief. So if you're going to remove fuel subsidy and not up to a year, you're already proposing the removal of electricity subsidy, then it means that maybe you don't have the kind heart towards the people you are leading. So I'm going to have you speak on this a little. What do you think about the removal of electricity subsidy? And the debate is still ongoing at the moment.
All right. So like I said, I remember that in the build-up to the 2023 elections, one of the things that we have a business community, where we have entrepreneurs, business owners at different levels, skills of business. And one of the things that we did in the build-up to the 2023 election is to do a study of the three, major front runners. We all know them, all right, and then begin to do what is their possible policy trusts, and how everyone should prepare for them. All right. And one of the things that we said about our current president, if he became president then, was that if you know him very well, at least from his antecedents as the Lagos State governor for 8 years, was the fact that he has, he has this boldness to take very hard policy decisions. All right. Now, so first of all, I expected this. All right. A lot of things had to be done, yes. But the truth is this, that the challenge we are having right now is the fact that the human face that appears not to be there sometimes. All right. And sometimes I believe that is largely also dependent on those providing advice to the president on how to be able to implement some of these things. So the truth is this, there is no way, there is definitely not going to be an easy way out of the challenges we had. Electricity subsidy, now the good thing, and that was why you probably noticed that they decided to divide the whole country into different bands, band A, I think band A to band E, all right, and decided that, okay, let's remove the subsidy for those, that are on band A, Now, even though that also for me was a problem, because most of to a large extent, uh, um, most of our industrial areas belong to band A, and that means that it will increase production costs, and that also means that that cost was going to be transferred to final consumers, and that is part of the things contributing to our inflation. All right, but I believe, like I said, these things are moves that have to be made. All right, the only challenge we are having is the fact that our politicians need to now be able to understand that there has to be an human face to these things and gradually implement them. All right. Now, if I'm hoping that these things, the only thing that can save us right now is that these policies begin to deliver the expected results, such that in a very short time we will begin to have some relief from the implementation of these policies, and that's the only thing that could make things better. But as it stands now, bringing all of these things together definitely was going to bring, the population into some sort of standstill, which is what we're experiencing right now, of course, and that's part of the reasons why you see labor coming out, to down tools, so generally these impacts are expected. All right, just that I'm hoping that the policies start producing the desired result so that we'll have some relief, hopefully.
Well, speaking about the fact that we have most of our manufacturing companies in the band A areas, the manufacturers CEO index that was republished some days back, which I already spoke about on my show, suggested that manufacturers are positive about things in Nigeria, and I said on the show, what did you expect them to say before? They would say they are positive about happenings in Nigeria, but the point is, when, like you rightly mentioned, when the cost of production goes up, it will affect the price of goods and services, and the people who will pay more are the people that you are giving subsidy to. So you are saying that we're going to remove subsidy for those in the other bands and then make sure that those in band A pay for what they use. They will transfer the cost. It's cost push. They will push the cost to the consumers. So let's talk about, and then we have also seen that the CBN has raised the monetary policy rate over 400 basis points. Now that has also affected manufacturers in Nigeria because they cannot even borrow money anymore like they used to do before. So let's talk about what can we do going forward to make sure that this country, by the time we sit here again, most likely in 2025, and to say, let's see what has happened from June to May, let's see what has happened. To be good news all the way. So let's go.
All right. So like I said earlier, continually, first of all, I believe that, like you said, concerning the manufacturers, the first thing that everyone has to realize is that we all have to find a way to have hope despite all the challenges. Because the truth is, the more we fall into despair, and whine about the problems, the more difficult it will be to come out of them. All right. So, and that is why you would see me, every time I'm talking about what can we do, how can it get better, and then I'm, talking about the fact that we have to be hopeful. We have to be hopeful because at the point where we completely lose hope, everything is finished. All right. So right now we are at a point where, like I said, there has been a lot of policies that have been implemented. That these policies have long-term, great impacts. All right, but in the short term, it is bringing some level of inconvenience and discomfort to the people. All right, and that is why I believe I'm a strong supporter of some of the social intervention programs that the government is implementing. We just have to figure out a way to ensure that these social intervention programs get to the grassroots. So you have cash transfer policies, you have the student loan, being the idea of the student loan. You have some other ideas being bandied around. There has to be pressure on the government, which is part of what the NLC is doing, to implement these policies, number one, and then to ensure that this implementation gets to the grassroots. And that is the function of the civil society and other pressure groups, manufacturers association, all the associations, all the civil society groups, that are in the country have to begin to put pressure on the government to ensure that these social intervention programs get to the grassroots, all right, so that it will bring some relief to these policies. I also believe that another thing that we have to really, really pressurize the government to do is to cut down on the cost of governance. All right. Now, I believe so strongly that part of the reason that we see so much despair and so much, disquiet and dissatisfaction with the government is that you see a situation where the government is implementing policies and requesting that the populace should tighten their belts and make some sacrifices for a period until we start seeing the benefits of these policies. All right. But we also have to begin to see government, and the representatives also taking some of those sacrifices. All right. So a major thing that we have to find a way to begin to pressurize the government is to cut down the cost of governance. All right. We find situations where we have well over 40 ministers, you have so many special advisors, you have so many, this government, as it's probably running the most expensive, especially at the federal level, it's probably running the most expensive government so far. And this cost, and then you also have the legislature, the budget of the National Assembly is continually increasing every year. All right, billions of naira, to run the National Assembly. Now, what that means is that now the problem with that is the fact that when the citizens see the leaders and how the spending is being done, it's hard to convince citizens to say, hey, you should make some sacrifice, because the sacrifice has to start from the top. All right. So another thing that I believe that we should continually pressurize the government is to find a way to cut down on the cost of governance. All right. And I believe that among other things, we can do a lot of other things, but I believe that we can do this too and have some patience. All right. Now, this is banking on the fact that there is sincerity on the side of our government to ensure that these policies are implemented, for the good of the people. Because if, like I said, removal of subsidy and every other thing that has been done so far, if they are well implemented and there's sincerity on the part of government, I believe that it might not produce now, I believe that in a matter of 1, 2 years, 3 years, before the end of the first, term of this administration, if we choose to give them another term, all right, I believe that we should start seeing productivity from all of these policies. We just need to have some hope. And in the meantime, in the interim, while we're waiting for these things to produce results, put pressure on them to ensure that cost of governance is reduced, and put pressure on them to ensure that these social intervention policies that are being introduced, to cushion the effect of these policies, they get to the right recipients that should have them, and not just into the hands of politicians and their cronies.
Okay, well, now I think you've just echoed my point, and a point I've been making for a while now, that can we please press the brake and just chill on any other policy that we want to implement? Let's see what the policies that we have implemented already will produce before we begin to plug in more. Because some policies are short-term policies. They give you the result in the short term. Some policies are medium-term. These policies that have been implemented, removal of fuel subsidy, raising the also trying to eliminate electricity subsidy, all of these are long-term policies that can yield results. So I think I also buy into your idea that we should cut the cost of governance, but also to see that the policies implemented already are beginning to yield their fruit before we then say we want to plug in more policies. But just to have your say on pretty much my last question on the show today, this morning I read in the news, I also did in my morning brief, that the Labour Party, the organized Labour and the government have decided to negotiate for a full week to be able to come to an agreement on what the new minimum wage is. It looks like Edo State governor seems to be a prophet. He sees ahead. The last time that they announced 30K, he announced 40,000. Now he announced 70,000, and the government is saying we cannot do beyond 60K. And the organized labor are saying that what they want is 464,000 there. So what do you think is a reasonable, sustainable, and feasible minimum wage that the government and the organized labor should agree on?
All right. So first of all, the one thing that we have to settle in is the fact that the government and labor will never agree on particular minimum wage. All right, because of course labor will always want more, and the government will always want to pay less. All right, So, but I'm also of the belief that, of course, I believe that government saying 60,000 is what they can afford, and labor saying 464,000 is what they are ready to accept. It's just negotiation tactic. All right. I mean, we all know when we go to the market. All right. So you go to the seller, and the seller knows that this thing is 5,000, but the seller first tells you this thing is 20,000. All right. And then you, the buyer, also, that this is 5,000, but you also say, I'm not ready to pay more than 2,000. And then you start negotiation, and hopefully you arrive somewhere around the 5,000 that you all know that the price is supposed to be. So I believe that both of them also know that on both sides their demands are quite unrealistic, but they also know that they also have to negotiate, start from a very high point, so that we can all come to something in the middle. I believe that there is no way we are going to do a 464,000 minimum wage, because this is not just about the federal government. You have state and local government, and you have the organized private sector. All right, that definitely. I mean, if you say a minimum wage of 464,000, how can, for instance, a private company be able to afford paying that for the least of their staff, maybe their drivers or their cleaners? And then how do you graduate that to more skilled labor and the management level? All right. So now, definitely, but I believe that first of all, both of them have to come back to the negotiation table, which I heard this morning that they are doing that right now. They want to get back to the negotiation table and then come with more realistic demands. I believe that 60,000 is the last minimum wage that we had, this 30,000 that we currently have, was instituted in 2019. Between 2019 and now, we've had inflation of well over 200%. All right, generally across board, and within that period. All right, so definitely we cannot expect that someone that was earning a 30,000 naira in 2019 can afford to do the same things with what he has, because everything has gone up.
Sure.
So I believe that I might not be able to give a specific figure, maybe 100,000, maybe 200,000. All right, but I believe that both of them should come back to the table and present more realistic demands. All right, government has to raise up. Definitely, I believe that no one should earn less than 100,000 in this economy, in the economy we are in right now. I believe that that's the least, because to take care of one person, I'm not even talking about a family person now. I mean, a lot of times I tell myself, I wonder how people who earn 50,000, who earn 40,000, who earn 70,000, how they are surviving. All right. So I believe that both sides have to get more realistic. All right. The labor has to reduce their demands very drastically. All right. Something I believe less than 200,000. All right. And I believe also that the government has to raise what they are ready to pay also, but not raise it too high, considering the private sector. And you have states that still since 2019 cannot yet pay the current minimum wage. So you can imagine, for those kinds of states, that you now raise the minimum wage again, and you have states that even at this current, minimum wage level, they are owing, 4 months, 7 months, some over 12 months, salaries, some are paying half salaries, some are paying graduated, kind of salaries, So all these things have to, then when we now come to an agreement on a wage, we now have to come to a point where we can agree, enforce the payment of this national minimum wage. All right. Now, lastly, another thing I would probably suggest, all right, is the fact that we can actually have a different minimum wage. We don't have, I believe strongly that we don't have to have a national minimum wage. All right. That means that we don't have to have a minimum wage that has to go across board. I believe that the federal government has a different capacity. I believe state and local governments, they have different capacities. I believe the private sector have different capacity. I believe that at these three levels, we can have a band. It doesn't have to be a specific amount. It can be a band. Say, for instance, at the federal level, you can have maybe a band of say 100,000 to 150,000, and then at the local state and local government, you can have maybe something less. At the private sector level, you can have maybe around maybe 80,000, 100,000, to say 150,000. I believe that we can have different, scales that will be used to measure, instead of having something across board that will be realistic for some because they have so much resources, and then unrealistic, for some others. And I believe that that's a major reason why for this back and forth, because even if the federal government agrees to some, what's the assurance that state and local government will be able to do it? What's the assurance that the private sector will be able to abide by it? So let's come to a conclusion. I believe that hopefully today, if both sides come back to the negotiation table, they can be able to come to something reasonable, and the economy can get back to life again.
Sure, but someone on my show one time even said that if the government can make it a yearly thing where there is this yearly review of the minimum wage, it will give a form of relief to say, okay, we'll pay you 70,000 naira this year, and next year you can come back again we'll see how the economy is, and maybe raise it by 20,000 naira. That could even work and be pacifying enough for people who are fighting to ensure that the minimum wage is nothing less than 464,000 naira. But Mr. Olasoji Odunayo, thank you for coming on the show. I'm glad you were here today. So much you've said. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here. And your show has been a lifesaver. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you for joining today. Do have to follow us on all our social media platforms. And also, I asked the question at the beginning of the show, grade the last 1 year of President Bola Tinubu. Till I see you next time, my name remains Oluwapelumi Awe. We'll see you on the next one.